Chapter 16. A House Divided. I found myself stuck in that strange stage between dreams and awake. A dull ache blanketed my body. I struggled to find the willpower to open my eyes, but I was too comfortable in my half-sleep state to return to the waking world. My body shifted, and I felt a weight on top of me. Covers. I smiled lightly and pulled them closer. Actual covers. Sheet and comforter and all. What did I do to deserve this small blessing? I took in a deep breath and smelled food. Actual food. My smile deepened as my eyes fluttered open. I couldn't remember what the smell was, just that the taste was even better. I blinked a few times, and as the room came into focus, my heart stopped. Where was I? I shot up in the bed, much to my body's contempt. I had to force myself to ignore its complaints as my eyes darted around the room. Memories of last night came flooding back with each small detail of the room, and a sigh of relief escaped me. I was safe. I was free. The early morning sun was just barely peeking into the room, lulling me to go back to sleep. I allowed myself to fall back into Lyra's bed and stared into the ceiling. The bed was so welcoming, I nearly dozed back into a light dream, but, well, as my body slowly woke up, so did a faint throb. Curious, I reluctantly peeled away the covers and winced at what I found. Blood. Just a stain, but blood nonetheless. The blue denim of my jeans had been painted an ugly brown around my leg. There wasn't much, but it was still noticeable. I searched the sheets around it and was relieved to find that it hadn't spread. A defeated sigh escaped me. The smell of food and the sight of the stain chased off any hopes of rest. My body groaned and popped as I stretched, trying to anchor myself back into the waking world. I carefully swung my legs off of the bed and stood up, only to jump out of my skin as the unicorn shouted beneath me. Lyra, are you alright? I winced, my heart racing. I was back on the bed, clutching my chest with a hand to calm myself down. One night of being back in a normal home and everything was already spiraling out of control. I'm fine. Lyra waved off with an embarrassed smile. She went back to inspecting her tail, combing it with a hoof. Just, surprised me more than anything. She offered with a weak chuckle. My hand wiped away the last traces of sleep in my eyes. Sorry, I didn't even see you there, I explained. I thought you were on the other end of the bed. My heart sank a little deeper as she kept focusing on her tail, brushing out stray hairs. Are you sure you're alright? Lyra stopped and offered me a smile. Hunter, I'm fine, she promised. Her eyes looked to the side as an embarrassed blush took over. And I was on the rug, but, well, it sounded like you were having trouble sleeping. Oh no, I was out like a light, I chuckled, hoping to lighten the mood. The bed was great. I just toss around a bit in my sleep is all. Yeah, you, talk a bit, too, Lyra added sheepishly. Oh. Well, that was news to me. My mind raced back to my dreams, trying to remember where my subconscious went, but the memories were already fading. I hope I didn't say anything too embarrassing, I prayed with a small, self-conscious smile. Lyra waved a hoof. Don't worry, it was all mumbled anyway. The door suddenly crashed open and my heart leapt out of my chest again. Our heads snapped to greet the cream-colored mare panting in the doorway. I heard you scream, Bonbon explained as she looked frantically around the room. Her eyes locked on me and narrowed. What did you do? She demanded. I held up my hands in defense and opened my mouth, but Lyra beat me to the punch. Everything's fine, Bonbon, she promised. Hunter just accidentally stepped on me. No harm done. Bonbon's eyebrow rose. Accidentally, huh? She asked, although it sounded more like a challenge than a question. Hey, I was half asleep, I explained, the words stumbling out of my mouth. I didn't see her, but I'm wide awake now. No more accidents. I tacked on a smile, hoping it would add to the sincerity, but the nervous sweat may have made it unconvincing. Bonbon's glare lingered before her eyes fell off me and onto Lyra. The steely look melted away, but the caution was still in her voice.
I made you some pancakes, Lyra. They're blueberry, your favorite. I need to leave soon. Gumdrop doesn't like it when I'm late.
Her eyes flickered back to me.
Are you sure you'll be all right by yourself?
Lyra nodded confidently.
Don't worry. Hunter and I will hold down the fort.
She grinned. Bonbon didn't appear to appreciate the answer, but she also didn't seem to be in the mood to argue.
Just be careful,
she sighed.
Okay?
With a reassuring smile from Lyra, Bonbon reluctantly turned and left us to our devices. Well, she seems to be warming up to me just fine, I commented as the door shut behind the mare.
Just give her some time,
Lyra offered with an apologetic smile.
She just isn't used to you yet. Once all of this monster business blows over, and if I can convince her to visit, I'm sure you two will get along just fine.
It sounded more like she was giving wishful thinking, but I didn't want to crush her hopes. I carefully stood up again, allowing my body to stretch. There was a dull throb in my leg, but it was livable. Lyra noticed and looked me up and down.
How's your leg?
She asked hopefully. It's been better, I said, understatement of the century. Still aching a bit, but at least I can stand on it. I tried to prove my point by shifting my weight and bit back a wince. Mostly, that is, I hissed, gingerly lifting it off the floor.
Maybe we can get Sakura to take a look before you leave,
Lyra suggested. I nodded. Yeah, that would be nice. The sooner the better, too. Maybe she can whip up another miracle potion. I joked. I took another whiff of the air. The smell of food was intoxicating, and my stomach voiced its complaint at not being filled. My hand shot to cover it, and I offered Lyra a meek smile. So, how about that breakfast? Lyra giggled.
Go on ahead. I'll meet you down there.
The sheets on the bed began to float and rearrange themselves. A part of me wanted to stay and help, but the promise of food lured me back to the door. I followed the scent across the second floor towards the stairs and paused. Bonbon stared at me from below at the front door. She raised her hoof to her distrustful eyes and traced them back to me. She stepped out without a word, and the soft slam of the door seemed to echo around me. I released the breath I was unknowingly holding and silently prayed that Sakura would arrive sooner than planned. Today was going to be long and uncomfortable with that mare otherwise. I trudged down the stairs, pushing Bonbon's glare out of my head. The scent carried me into the kitchen, and my stomach groaned longingly to the small banquet that awaited me. Pancakes, hash browns, biscuits, fruits, leftover muffins. Oh, my mouth was watering. How long had it been since I'd had a real breakfast? Without wasting any time, I moved for the nearest plate and began greedily loading them up. Half of the stack of pancakes found themselves on my plate and drowning in syrup. Hash browns were thrown sloppily to the side and my hands grazed over the bowl of apples before claiming a pair of muffins. My parched tongue led me to the fridge and I helped myself to a glass of orange juice. Satisfied with my harvest, I moved back to the dining room, where a new problem then presented itself. The dining table was much too small. Its top barely even reached my knees. The chairs were even worse. Sitting in them might as well have meant sitting on the ground. It almost didn't sound like a bad idea, but I was Lyra's guest, and my parents would scold me if I didn't act like it. I could hear Lyra coming down the stairs as I sat down, and she appeared in the doorway as I finished stuffing my legs beneath the table. She hummed an odd tune as she entered the kitchen, and a plate followed nearby, collecting her breakfast as it drifted in the air. My eyes couldn't help but watch curiously as I sat patiently. Something about unicorns and their magic felt unreal to watch.
Oh, were you waiting for me?
I blinked and realized she was staring back. My stomach answered before I had a chance to. My hand moved to cover it as if it could pull back the sound, and I offered an apologetic smile. Lyra chuckled lightly.
You don't have to do that. I can tell you're starving.
Oh, yes, I do, I snorted, turning back to my meal and prodding it with a fork. My folks wouldn't let me hear the end of it if I ate before everyone else was seated. Drilled into me since I was a kid.
Sounds nice,
she offered. A faint chuckle escaped me. You and I have very different definitions of nice, I pointed out. She seated herself across from me and I let out a sigh. It was nice, though, I admitted softly. Lyra adjusted herself and gave a warm smile.
Well, I think you've been waiting long enough. Dig in.
I didn't have to hear it twice. I plucked up the knife and quartered the stack of pancakes. They had been sitting long enough to absorb the butter and syrup that had originally slathered them, and it only made me all the more eager to steal a taste. I had to restrain myself from swallowing it whole. My stomach waited in greedy anticipation as I rolled the food in my mouth, trying to savor every second. I eventually gave in and swallowed, and, with a sigh, set down my fork and stared at the rest of my breakfast.
How do you like it?
Lyra asked hopefully. I didn't answer immediately.
Hunter?
She pressed, a sliver of worry entering her voice. This has to be a crime, I deadpanned, looking up to Lyra. She stared at me, dumbfounded. Her mouth moved, but she didn't know what to say. A few seconds ticked by before I couldn't keep the charade up any longer. My grin was starting to break free. These pancakes are better than my mother's. Lyra blinked. The gears in her head slowly turned, and as I hid my grin behind a hand, realization finally struck her. She picked up her napkin and threw it at me playfully.
You jerk!
She accused, but she couldn't help her own smile.
You had me worried for a second.
The air quickly lightened, and we laughed. Lyra summoned her napkin back, and I was already scarfing down the rest of my pancakes. In all seriousness, though, this food is incredible. I gestured to what was left of the stack with my fork. Bonbon made these?
Yeah, she's quite the cook, isn't she?
She chased down a bite of blueberry pancake with a sip of orange juice.
I'm real lucky to have a friend like her. Celestia knows where I'd be without her.
I smiled. This was nice. Sitting here, eating a normal breakfast with someone, just enjoying the small talk. It was a pleasant relief from waking in the cold and lonely castle with only scraps of fruits and vegetables to make a meal of. The danger of being caught still hung in the air over me as I ate, but it was comforting just having company to talk to rather than my own split consciousness. It allowed me to think of my situation from another view and think on it some more. A small laugh bubbled inside, and I couldn't restrain the unbelieving grin growing on my face. You know, I started, trying to hold back the chuckle escaping me. If you would have told me a couple months ago that I'd be sitting here in a town full of ponies and eating breakfast with a talking unicorn, I would have called you crazy. I got to work on my last muffin. It's funny how life will just throw you curveballs like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
Lyra giggled.
And if somebody told me I'd befriend an alien fugitive and let me in my home, I'd probably say the same thing.
Everything was at ease. There was no tension in the air. Nothing felt out of the ordinary. It just seemed so normal. The breakfast could very well have been at home or at school, and I would barely recognize the difference. Oh, well, outside the obvious, anyway. I watched Lyra's fork twirl in the air with an amused smile. I mean, I knew unicorns possessed some sort of uncanny power. Too many weird things happen around them for me to think otherwise, but I never really had a word for it until that fateful night in the hospital. Magic. It made sense, in the sense that I couldn't explain it in any other way. I never had much time to sit and think about it until now. A part of me always joked that it was magic back then, but now, sure enough, in the land of unicorns and pegasi, talking ponies, and even mythological creatures, yeah, magic was also real. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised by now. My fork dragged the last bite of pancake across the empty plate, trying to sponge up what little syrup was left. My stomach ached, but it was a much more welcome sensation than usual. The last time I had had this much food was the night before the camping trip. My empty plate lifted and drifted next to Lyra's.
Why don't you put some music on?
She offered.
I can handle the dishes. A phonograph's in the living room.
I rose from the table and stretched my legs. Anything in particular? I asked on my way out. Lyra disappeared into the kitchen with the dishes and called out, "Surprise me!" I knelt in front of the phonograph, trying to ignore the dull pain in my leg. A faint smile grew as I searched through the records in the bookshelf next to it. This brought back old memories of much simpler times. My fingers flipped through album after album, and I quickly realized I didn't know what any of these artists. Sapphire Shores, Blue Note Blues, Andante and Allegro? Now that I thought about it, I wasn't sure why I was surprised that I didn't know them. The list was unending, but I eventually narrowed it down to a couple choices. I wasn't sure who Sapphire Shores or Blue Note were, or what their music sounded like. The list on the backs of their albums didn't offer much help. The covers were colorful enough to catch my eye and pick them out, but I was still going in blind, or deaf, I suppose. I sighed. Sorry, Blue. I'm a sucker for sax, but it'll have to wait for another day. I retired his record back to the shelf and carefully pulled Sapphire's vinyl out. It still had a nice shine to it, a pleasant little surprise for me. I was so used to holding him as if they would turn to dust in my hands. The record was set, spinning in place, and waiting to be heard. I led the needle over it and gently let it down. There was a soft static, and my head recoiled as a woman's voice sang loudly in my face. I chuckled in amusement and lowered the volume before moving to the couch.
Ooh, this is one of Bonbon's favorites!
Lyra was grinning from ear to ear as she trotted into the living room. She crawled up onto the couch and, after studying how my legs rested on the coffee table, mimicked me. Her hooves had to stretch to just barely reach the coffee table. She then leaned her head against the back of the couch and rested her hooves on her chest. She hummed in thought and looked up to me.
This ain't too bad.
She smiled. We both burst into a fit of giggles, Lyra pulling her hind legs into a more comfortable position. I took in a breath and was about to release a content sigh when a scent caught my attention. I sniffed the air, trying to find where it was coming from, and looked down. Hesitantly, I pulled up my shirt and took another sniff.
Oh, God, is that me?
I asked as I recoiled.
Is what you?
Lyra asked innocently.
That smell! Ugh!
Lyra blinked.
Wait, so you're not supposed to smell like that?
She pressed cautiously.
No!
I shook my head.
Oh, thanks, Celestia.
She sighed in relief, melting back into the couch.
I was going to say something, but I didn't want to offend you or anything. There's a shower upstairs if you want it.
You wouldn't mind? I asked. She waved her hoof dismissively.
Go ahead. There should be some spare towels down in the cabinet.
You're a saint, I called, already on my way upstairs. Everything was smaller than I expected, though to be honest, I wasn't sure why I expected otherwise. My head went well over the mirror. I crouched down to get a better look at myself, and the beast of the Everfree came down to greet me. Grime still smothered my face, buried into my mangy, patchy beard and rat's nest of hair. I realized in embarrassment that I'd spent all morning looking like this. I barely recognized the eyes in the reflection, and they bored into mine, searching for some familiarity. Something familiar did burn in the back of my head.
You're growing complacent,
my inner voice warned. I'm about to shower, I pointed out in a whisper. Sorry for not being on edge. My reflection scoffed.
This pony is making you soft,
it accused.
It's not safe here.
I rolled my eyes and turned on the water, hoping to drown out the conversation from any eavesdroppers. I tore off my shirt and made my way back to the mirror. My reflection leaned in, resting its hands on the sink's countertop. I'm safer here than anywhere else, I argued, glaring into its eyes. What would you rather? I go back into the Everfree? The wolves will kill me before I make it 10 feet in there.
You wouldn't even be in this mess if it wasn't for her.
It hissed.
You were doing so well before she came in. You weren't scared of hurting any of these ponies, and now you're throwing away opportunities to save yourself time and pain by saving ponies from a town that hates you. And after all they did, she is still trying to make you friends with them.
She saved my life, I reminded it. After all that talk of survival, I would have thought you'd appreciate that. Why don't you trust her?
Why do you trust her?
She's my friend. I paused to let that fact settle in. She risked herself to free me from the hospital, just like she's been risking herself to convince everybody to give me a second chance.
You may need to rethink your friends. We recall a few humans back on Earth you were attached to.
I grit my teeth and pushed away from the mirror. We're done here, I growled with finality. I bit back a wince as a headache pulsed.
Oh no, we are not,
the voice pressed.
You're getting too comfortable around your enemy.
Why do they all have to be my enemy? I demanded. What's wrong with wanting some friends in this twisted world? Why do I have to be alone? It didn't reply, but I could still feel it lingering in the corners of my mind. I took in a deep breath and slowly let it out. I was wasting Lyra's water. I pulled a towel out of the cabinet and stripped off my jeans and boxers. The water was scalding. My hand moved to the cold water valve, but paused as a realization struck me. I haven't had a hot shower in well over a month. I stepped into the burning tub and waited to adjust the heat before cleaning. A small shiver went down my spine. After over a month of bathing in the cold river water, it was wonderful to feel this burning over my body. I ran my hands over my face and through my hair, and watched as the caked-in dirt washed down the drain, as if the grime was the Everfree itself. The thought lingered, and I began scrubbing the rest of me, searching wildly for some soap. The Everfree ran down the drain in dark rivers. I peeled away the bandages over my body, exposing the wounds and stitches to the purifying heat. Faint crimson streams trailed down to merge with the Everfree, and with each river that disappeared, I felt more and more at ease.